Від імені дирекції Канадської української мистецької фундації вітаю вас всіх сьогодні тут. Дуже дякую, що ви прийшли. У нас є велика честь сьогодні вітати в галереї в нашій фундації аналітика глобальних справ і також науковця Atlantic Council, Senior Fellow Atlantic Council Михайло Боцюрків. Михайло Боцюрків з часу війни осів в Україні, і він також і співпрацює постійно із глобальними медіа, веде свої репортажі про Україну з України. Зараз він знаходиться в Одесі і каже, що це перлина Чорного моря. Михайло Боцюрків сьогодні розповідає нам про роль соціальних мереж. Нам Путін виключив електрику.
Як ви знали?
Алло. Окей, я не знаю, що сталося, але дійсно щось з мікрофоном. Окей. Алло? Окей. Добре, то тепер ЗСУ запрацювало. Окей. Добре. То Михайло Боцюрків сьогодні розповідає на тему соціальних мереж, як вони це перший раз, що війна фактично, як то кажуть, in real time, все ми можемо прочитати і бачити в соціальних мережах. Там і новини, там і всі наші трагедії, болі і плачі, і там також є і краудфандинг, там збирають постійно гроші на Україну, на допомогу нашій армії, на допомогу нашим біженцям. І там також є і гумор. Гумор, до речі, дуже потрібний. Наші українці дуже талановиті в цьому. Десь я таке прочитала на початку війни, як казали, Путіна до Кремля, перепрошую, в мавзолей Ленін виспався. Це наші придумали. І там вже давно його чекає місце на нього. То сьогодні, власне, Михайло розповідає, як це все виглядає в соціальних мережах. Соціальні мережі також є і великий інструмент для російської пропаганди, які свої щупальці буквально розпускають і використовують ці можливості, щоб, як то кажуть, brainwash своїх людей і навіть і на Заході. А після Михайлової лекції запрошую вас з ним поспілкуватися і придбати його книжку з автографом автора. Недавно вийшла Global Pandemic, цифрова пандемія, яка також продовжує тему і сьогоднішньої лекції. І також буде дегустація вина, яке Михайло привіз із винарень України і Молдовії. Він точно їх назве і розповість, одна винарня вже не існує, тому що вже її москалі знищили. Так що запрошуємо Михайла до слова. Дуже всім дякую за увагу.
Дякую, Олена. Дякую організаторам і дякую, що ви прийшли. Дуже гарний сонячний день. То це такий дуже гарний sacrifice. Я буду принаймні англійською говорити, бо я приїхав до України спочатку перед війною, і я не маю багато можливостей говорити англійською, то треба трохи практикувати. Але як ви побачите в моїй відео, я тимчасово в Одесі. Це є принаймні російськомовне місто, але майже всі перейшли зараз на українську мову. Це дуже круто бачити. Я вам дам спочатку такий малесенький апдейт, що дається в Україні, і тоді перейдемо на мій презентацію. Але, this part I'll just do in English. So, as I always say, you click on the news, or, in our case, you open up your curtains in the morning, and as you look outside, and, it's hard to believe. It's hard to believe that in 2022, on European soil, this is what's happening in Ukraine. It's heartbreaking. I know it's heartbreaking for all of you. It's particularly heartbreaking watching it every day. I deliberately put on a suit today because for the past 10 days or so, most nights we actually sleep in our clothes because we don't know what the night will bring. Odessa has been mostly spared. One of the reasons that it has very good air defenses, but another one is it's the port. There are 3 ports in Odessa. And right now, those 3 ports are supposed to be protected by a deal signed by the Russians and the Ukrainians, brokered by the United Nations and Turkey. Although we all know that the Russian signature isn't even worth the paper it's put on. The thing to look out for in a few weeks from now, I think later on in November, the deal expires and it has to be renegotiated or re-agreed to rather. This deal is very, very important because it helped unlock more than 20 million tons of grain and sunflower oil that was blocked in the Odessa ports because of the Russian aggression, because of the Russian blockade. And you may think, well, why did the Russians do that? I can guarantee you it wasn't out of any humanitarian concerns. The reason, my opinion anyway, is that many of the countries suffering the hunger exacerbated by this blockade are the Egypts of the world, African friends of Russia. So I think Putin was under pressure to alleviate this blockade. But I just put it in my update today is that for some reason, I counted the other day, I only saw 4 ships on the horizon of Odessa. It's big, the Black Sea is big. The flow of grain has been reduced to a trickle, and no one really seems to know why. So when this deal was signed, it was estimated that it would take more than 500 ships to carry the backlog out, and then we would begin again carrying the new grain out to world ports. But it goes to show, at least the world now knows what a key provider of the world's food Ukraine is. It doesn't take much, given what's going on elsewhere in the world, for countries to be knocked off the edge from near starvation to total starvation. It's heartbreaking to see what's going on in some African countries and elsewhere in the world too. You have food banks popping up in Peru, for example, because they can't get enough fertilizer from Russia and Ukraine because of these blockages. I could probably give you a separate presentation on that, but I'm going to Winnipeg and I'm supposed to speak on that topic there of how food is being used as a weapon. But let us just say that since before the war started, Mr. Putin has managed to weaponize energy, he's weaponized migration, and he's weaponized food. So this war, I had a conversation some months ago with my editors at CNN Opinion, and we kind of came to the conclusion that this is the first war that's being played out in real time on social media, TikTok especially, also on platforms like Telegram, on Twitter and elsewhere. It's amazing to see that, for example, as soon as there's a Russian missile strike, it starts appearing on certain Telegram channels, and then you can track it further that way. The other thing that's happened in this war is, as we all know, before the war, many sectors of the Ukrainian economy were just roaring to life, and one of them was the technology sector. So when the war started, a lot of tech people had to leave, but yet they continued to arm Ukrainians with technology. And by the way, the subtitle of my book is During the Pandemic, we saw how tech went from bad to good. Also during this war, I think we can argue that technology has proven itself as a force of good. So, for example, on our smartphones, we all have this повітряна тривога alarm, the air raid siren alarm. And some days it goes off 5 or 6 times a day, for some reason often in the middle of the night. And actually, flying here, I had my phone on in-flight Wi-Fi, and it was a nighttime flight, and I forgot to turn off the app. So in the middle of the night, in the cabin of my aircraft, this alarm goes off, and it's very, very loud, and everyone was going, what the heck is that? So, but it goes to show you that, technology, at least, no matter where we are in the world, we know when there's a possible threat to certain cities. The other app that has proven itself actually a new one, very effective, is there's an app produced where you can be anywhere in Ukraine, and if you see a drone or a missile coming towards you, or hopefully not towards you, you can press this app and it alerts ZSU, Ukrainian Armed Forces, about this incoming threat. So that's the newest thing. And also there's a Telegram channel, I have a screenshot of it, run by the Ukrainian Armed Forces. And what it is, it's called Ukraine Offensive, and it now has about 100,000 followers. And its slogan is "Fighting on the Civil Meme Front Lines of the Information War" since 2014. And what it does, it provides a kind of real-time flow of military updates of what's happening in Ukraine. So the other thing that was good that happened when the war started was a lot of foreign news organizations set up operations in Ukraine. BBC was there already, BBC Ukraine, but also CNN put up two big pop-up bureaus, one in Lviv and one in Kyiv. I spent a lot of time, especially in the Lviv one, doing live hits. You may have seen one or two. But the other, this is just a bit of a side topic of my main presentation. The other cool thing that BBC did is, some of you may be familiar, at the start of their newscasts, they have a countdown. And for the first time anyone can remember, BBC redid their countdown, especially focused on Ukraine. So I'm going to play that. It's 41 seconds long. But this is really special because they usually only do this, like for example, if there's a royal wedding or a monarch dies, it's very rare for them to redo their countdown. So let's just have a quick look, because this is a kind of, it'll remind you of some of the iconic images from the war that we saw at the start. So I mentioned that TikTok and Twitter have become very popular destinations for people to go to get their information inside and outside Ukraine. The Twitter feed of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine has got an astounding number of followers. And they have a whole team 24/7, mostly young people, dedicated to updating their feed depending on what happens. So this is one of my favorite. They tweeted this, that unless they, in other words, the Russians, want an unpleasantly hot summer, we advise our valued Russian guests not to visit Ukraine and Crimea, because no amount of sunscreen will protect them from the hazardous effects of smoking in authorized areas. Of course, this came out right after the strikes on Crimea. At the time, we weren't really sure who was responsible, but then it turned out it was the Ukrainians. So have a look at the video that they did. It's pretty cool. So that one, as you might imagine, went viral. A lot of people saw it, but it's a really good example of the innovation going on in Ukraine. So going back to what Uliana was starting to say about social media and its role, I've watched hundreds of hours, literally, of TikTok videos uploaded by Ukrainians since the start of the war. And it's served as kind of a virtual town square of what Ukrainians are going through, what they're feeling. It's also served as a very valuable resource for Ukrainians overseas, Poland, Spain, Canada, US, to trade advice, to tell the world what they're going through. It's been a very valuable place to share your feelings. And you know, I have to warn you, or caution you rather, that some of these videos I'm going to show you probably will make you tear up a bit, or perhaps make you angry as well. The other thing that the online kind of traffic has shown us, and again, we had conversations at CNN about this, is it's kind of helped Ukrainians from Eastern Ukraine and Western Ukraine get to know each other better. It's helped them to at least partially reconcile their differences. It's also taken the language debate online and help Ukrainians debate on whether they should be speaking Ukrainian or Russian, or whether Ukrainians from Western Ukraine should be telling Ukrainians from Eastern Ukraine, who are mostly Russian speakers, which language they should be speaking. You will see in this presentation from some of the videos that this is still playing out. You will also see that in places like Odessa, as I said earlier, it's really changed to an overtly patriotic city where most people are speaking Ukrainian. Every second building, if not every building, has a Ukrainian flag painted on it. It's really amazing. So that's been something to see. And also I think, at a time when a lot of us, well, mostly Ukrainians, but I'm there too right now, is there are a number of things that war does to you. And one of them is it makes you feel particularly lonely. Even if you're from a big family or community, so many people have left. That Ukrainians have leaned into social media a lot just to keep in contact and find out what's going on. And again, through the humorous videos, it's helped people lift their spirits at the darkest times. So we're going to go onto this first set of videos right now. And what these show, I think, are the kind of massive displacement that started at the beginning of the war, the fear, and the kind of need to resettle. I'm starting out, and I promise you this will be the only video with me in it, is from the very start of the war, where I'm live on CNN from Lviv. That was my first base in Ukraine, where I talk about the change that I was seeing in people's eyes, that you see this, when the bombing started, this hollow look, this look of sadness, of displacement. So I think you'll get the idea.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Brianna, I was most of the night, that's why I look so tired, with Ukrainian families. And I've worked a lot of complex emergencies before. You're beginning to see that kind of hollow look, that desperation. What, do I stay or do I go? It's heartbreaking. Then also, my colleague from BBC did a very moving report from the Lviv train station.
For many of them, a train that will take them either to Poland, Romania, Hungary, but there just aren't enough trains. Yet again, as we saw here day after day, it's a mood of desperation, and you can just hear in these voices shouting. That's a message repeated, because in the desperation, it's human nature. Everybody wants to get out, and that's the thing about war. It isn't always the noblest, the most self-sacrificing part of humanity that you see. What do you say to people who want to go, who want to get away from it?
Родичі під час війни.
Okay, 1 second. So, we don't really see these scenes anymore, but I want you to know that at any second, at any moment, you can have massive displacement, once again, of people who are in Ukraine. And don't forget, a lot of people are leaving Western Europe, for example, because the support has stopped, and they're going back to Ukraine. But because of the use of these drone missiles or whatever, people are really on edge. I went to the humanitarian Stab, the humanitarian center in Odessa the other day, just before coming here. And there were a lot of people there because they're looking for winter clothing, they're looking for food, they're looking for handouts. And I think we all agree that historically, despite everything that we've gone through, Ukrainians are pretty proud people. I think Ukrainians are, and I've been around the world, among the most resilient anywhere. They have this irrepressible proudness, but also resilience. And I think it's very difficult when I stand there and I watch, I think it's very difficult for them to put that pride aside and go to these centers and ask for food and ask for clothing. But that is what's happening here in 2022. So this is a bit more on the humorous side, this video, but it's of a young lady who, like many hundreds of thousands of people in Ukraine at the start of the war, she's in Western Ukraine, but she asked her relatives from Kiev and elsewhere to come to Western Ukraine and be with her for safety. Of course, the first week or so is very, very nice, but as time goes on, it gets a little bit more difficult. But I'll let her do the talking, you'll get the message.
День. Алло, мам, негайно приїжджай. Що значить нічого не буде?
Давай, на поїзд, ти швидко до мене. Головне, що ми будемо разом і в безпеці.
Перший тиждень.
Ой, мамусь, як же добре, що ти поруч. Трохи неочікувано, звичайно, було, що ти ще ті цвіту запросила. І 6 собак, враховуючи те, що я живу в одушці. Так, стоп. Це хто на підлозі спить? В сенсі, ви підібрали його в бомбосховищі. Ти ж 40-річний мужик. Гаразд, хай буде.
Перший місяць.
Господи, тьотя Свята, ви можете хоч хвилинку помовчати? Ви цілий день висите на телефоні. Хто там у вас? Макрон на проводі? Ні, дідусь, індіанці Майя не передбачали кінець світу на вівторок. Досить читати дурню. Так, мама, я поїла. Так, ой, як же ви мене дістали.
Третій місяць.
Всім до побачення, я на фронт. Я пройшла з вами 3 місяці і зрозуміла, що хочу вбивати.
So you didn't understand that. I mean, at the end, she's at 3rd month, she's at wit's end and says, I'm going to the front to fight because I have a feeling that I want to do something. So that went viral because I think it reflected what a lot of Ukrainians were going through. Of course, we have unlimited hospitality, but this was one of the biggest, actually, I think it was the biggest migration of civilians since the end of the Second World War. Internally within Ukraine and externally. So yeah, this happened quite a bit. And then I mentioned the humanitarian center that I visited in Odessa the other day. At the beginning of the war, a lot of people deservedly, well, maybe they needed humanitarian aid, maybe they didn't, but there were some observations made that some of our союзники, as we call them, were getting aid who probably never really needed it, but you'll get the message with this one.
Шановне українське панство, якщо ви знаходитесь за кордоном і ходите за гуманітарною допомогою, будь ласка, приходьте хоча б без пакунків з торгівельних центрів. А взагалі задумайтесь, чи насправді вам потрібна ця гуманітарна допомога і чи може ви забираєте чиєсь.
Yeah, so there weren't many like this, but it is an example of just Ukrainians, again, giving advice to other Ukrainians for some kind of discretion. The one next is really one of my favorite. It's, again, the video will do the talking for itself, but there was a lot of talk at the beginning of the war of Ukrainians from Kyiv, from Irpin, Bucha, eastern Ukraine coming to Lviv, to Halachina for shelter. The first wave of movement of people were mostly people who had means. They had cars, they had their clothing and documents with them. The second wave, most people did not have that. But what they found when they arrived in Lviv is that the rents went up very high, doubled, tripled. So people had difficulty getting a roof over their head. And also there were other examples of extortionate fees being charged for this and that. So Ukrainians in the West, I think they did open their hearts to fellow Ukrainians, but you always have bad apples, and I think this video reflects it pretty well.
Чекай, зараз я все знаю. І поїхали, і поїхали, і поїхали, і поїхали, і поїхали, і поїхали. Деколи мені здається, що в мене не дочка, а дятел. Алло, то Західна Україна? Ой, як добре я попала. Слухайте, я тут у вас об'явлення побачила, що ви приймаєте біженців і здаєте квартиру в оренду. Так, але написано сума договірна. Чекайте, а договірна то як? Скільки то має бути? 30 тисяч гривень? Боже, мужчина, та ви неправильно поняли. Я не хочу вас ту квартиру купити, а взяти в оренду на тиждень, 2, 3, а там же як карта ляже, може я вам і понравлюсь. А що? Твій тато пішов на війну, мені треба далі якось жити. То, що в мене немає манікюру, то не значить, що мені 100 років. Ну. А то за оренду 30 тисяч гривень. Воно больне. Мужчина, до мене йшла така інформація, що сьогодні зі сторони Білорусі на Львів, іменно на Львів, вилітає 3 ракети і 1 істребітель. Тримайтесь. Ти подивись, яка галицька гнида. 30 тисяч гривень в війну. І я буду сидіти тут до останньої ракети. Все.
Yeah, that one got quite a bit of attention, but things have normalized, it should be said, but that was an example of many complaints online of people saying that they were being taken advantage of. There's also, as you know, probably know, during the start of the war, President Zelensky imposed martial law. Part of that martial law was that Ukrainian males between the ages of 18 and 60 are banned from leaving the country. So that was done very suddenly, and of course the reason is that these are regarded as men of fighting age, and should they need to be drafted, well, they're inside the country. Having said that, there are exceptions. People can leave the country if they're in certain professions, or for example, like my driver who brought me to Moldova the other day, he's invalid, as they say in Ukrainian, so he was able to get a permit and drive me out. But there are also, for example, I was sitting in a restaurant in Warsaw a few months, 2 months ago, and there is a Ukrainian guy, apparently quite wealthy, sitting with two Americans, boasting about how for a few $1,000s he was able to get through the border, or not even pay sometimes. His friends say they're social volunteers and they're allowed outside of Ukraine, and then they go to Switzerland, the United Kingdom, or whatever. So there is that happening as well. And this isn't really in my notes, but I thought I'd mention it anyway. Also, at the beginning of the war, there were quite a few stories circulating of not really authorities, but of Ukrainians managing the checkpoints near the Ukrainian-Polish border, preventing people of color, African students, Indian students from crossing early. We cannot verify whether or not that happened, but there was a lot of stories about it. And it went like wildfire around the world. It was a side of Ukraine which no one would want to be shown, actually. So we all think that these were people acting on their own. There was no official policy to hold these people back. But I got caught in this whole thing very, very badly. I have to be honest with you, it was one of my lowest days in Ukraine. What happened, just quickly, I was on a panel on Al Jazeera. And it's a 30-minute panel, and the secret of live TV is the longer time they give you, the more rope you have to hang yourself, because you might say something wrong. But what happened was they talked to me about migration, and I said something along the lines of, well, I think what's going to happen is Europe is going to have a big problem on its doorstep, because all of these European-looking migrants are going to show up on their doorstep. That was then clipped by someone, some smarty pants, and it made me sound like I was saying that white migrants should get priority. Some of you here know me well, and I always say a refugee is a refugee is a refugee. They should all be treated the same. Of course, there are some differences, but anyway, that clip ended up on Trevor Noah's show with 3 or 4 other gringos who said something really ridiculous about migrants, and I didn't even know about it until I started getting lots of calls on my phone saying, what the heck are you talking about? And I never said anything like that, so I had to do a quick course correction on that. It eventually went away, but it's no joy being on Trevor Noah's show and being portrayed that way. Okay, so yeah, let's go on to the next video.
Що? Твій чоловік за кордоном? В Україні війна, а він за кордоном. Кої холєри ще не вдома? Як вдома? У жінки під спідницею? Та найде якусь тероборону, хай йде волонтерить. Та вони так в тій теробороні лише відсиджуються, нічого не роблять. Що в нас тут? Якась така дуже війна, хай йде напередок, хай йде на війну, туди, на схід. Такої там на сході. Ну, та певно, їм там добре платять. Ну, а як вернеться, буде мав і пільги, і все, і пенсію. Кому війна, кому мать родная. Загинув. Ну, то хоч будеш мала компенсацію. Не всі люди і то мають.
Yeah, that was a bit of a controversial video, but as I was saying, there is a lot of, you'll see 2 or 3 more videos on this topic, a lot of discussion about people trying to get out of going to the front line to fight. Nowadays, you hear stories of people wanting to volunteer, and there's a lot of volunteerism going on in Ukraine. I don't want you to get the impression from this that people in mass numbers were trying to avoid getting drafted or going to fight. But there were there were a lot of stories of people just not perhaps making enough of a matter. And I'll give you an example. I mean, I had Ukrainians in Lviv tell me in the early days of the war, you know, we're going around Plosh Renok, and there are all these men who look pretty well-resourced, drinking cappuccino all day. Why aren't they on the front line fighting? And most of them actually were from outside of Western Ukraine. So there was a lot of internal discussion about this, about why some have gone to the front line and why some haven't. And I think this next video gives you a bit of a sense of that. But also the other thing that happened on video, on social media, was talk about the mass psychological problems among Ukrainians, especially women and children. And this video coming up shows a couple early in the war in Lviv watching as the bombs are raining down on Lviv. This was very rare because Lviv has been spared for the most part, but imagine if you were in their place and you're on a balcony and you're watching these bombs come down so closely. And by the way, the other anxious thing for especially people like me or colleagues at CNN and BBC is, as part of martial law, there's a law against filming or live streaming bombings when they happen. Most media organizations, when they cover a war or any other conflict, they rush to the fire, they film it live, but the Zelensky administration decided very early on that none of that will happen because their premise is that this gives targeting information away to the Russians. So there was a lot of debate about that in terms of what we could or couldn't do in Ukraine, but I already mentioned the anxiety also foisted upon people by the air raid sirens, but watch this one.
Там залізничний вид.
Залізничний вон вокзал.
Он ще одна летить пиздець. Вон. Та хвиля, чи ти шугаєшся?
Звідки воно летіло, сука?
Справа.
And the other thing, sometimes in the videos you can actually see the rocket flying, these cruise missiles. Oftentimes they're sent from 1,000 miles away from inside Russia. That's how far they can fly, how fast, and how targeted. Putin has also used hypersonic missiles, which evade radar detection and don't set off the air raid siren alarms.
Вон ще летить.
There you go.
What month is this? Не шугайся.
I believe this was
Зараз не буде.
March, February, March.
А що там таке? Що вони бомблять?
Nowadays you will get arrested.
То скільки, 3 вже?
3 вже.
Це з Білорусі. Якщо виходить це вверх, це з Білорусі. Ще одна летить. Зараз знову буде хвиля. 4.
То що там таке є?
Та проводи. Львівтеплоенерго може. Обленерго. Воно в цій стороні.
Ну, є теплоенерго.
Ну то десь туди.
This never happened really again on that extent to Lviv, but it goes to show you, I mean, imagine if you were in Eastern Ukraine and you're watching this day after day after day, what it actually does to you. Just let this one end.
Все більше нема.
So let me bring you up to date to current time. So 2 weeks ago, a little bit more than 2 weeks ago, there was a commuter hour raid on Kiev with Iranian supply drones. Basically, these drones are basically flying piles of munition. They're called kamikaze drones because what they do is they swarm, they hover, and then they dive and they hit a target. The Russians have bought several hundred of these, and reportedly in return the Iranians got a Russian satellite, spy satellite, sent up to space. But this is something that no one had really predicted would happen. It's a new, as Putin gets more desperate, he's not making heavy gains on the battlefront, on the front line. They're turning to technology like this. But these are very, very scary things. And because many of them fly together, they confuse radar and they're difficult to shoot down. But the point I wanted to make with the next video, I watched this over and over. And by the way, for those of you who don't have maybe good Ukrainian, it's subtitled in English. It's of a kid who used to play in Shevchenko Park. And I think many of you know Shevchenko Park. Anyone who goes to Kiev has walked through Shevchenko Park. And if you're a kid living in central Kiev, you've probably played there. So we don't know if it was a result of bad targeting, but a missile went right into the park and at the intersection nearby. So it destroyed this kid's playground. And when I watched this kid and when I listened to how he was putting his words together, it reminded me of a lot of kids that I met, for example, in the Gaza Strip, where the conflict has been going on for a long, long time. To the point where kids know in which direction to dive under their bed or dive under their desk. We have reached that point in Ukraine. You will see when I show you this video. It's very, very sad to see. Having said that, I think when you hear this young boy speak, it's going to make you very proud as well. So watch this. It's one of my favorite.
Я просто не міг собі уявити, що це сталося. Я думав, що це ніколи не станеться. Що ті качелі колись розберуться, але що не те, що вони колись вибухнуть. Ну так.
Ну ты говоришь, все равно тебе не страшно?
Ні.
Почему нет?
Тому що я українець. А українцям нічого не страшно. От тому мені нічого і не страшно. Бо я вже і не таке бачив. Я бачив, коли їхав в Бучу, я бачив прострелені будинки. Вони, не так, як тут, але вони були прострелені. Я бачив кулі, які там пробиті були. Там була церква, які теж там були пробиті кулі. Ну, так.
Скажіть, будь ласка, то я одна так?
So, I think you get the point of, multiply this by tens and thousands of kids. So there's going to be, it's going to be a long process for kids to go back to normalcy, if we can call it that way. But there are organizations that, UNICEF and others, that specialize in psychosocial assistance to kids, and they're doing what they can. But if there's one thing I learned from my career with UNICEF is what kids really need at that age is normalcy, but also the ability to play with other kids. And when you have, these air raid sirens going off all the time, it's very difficult for kids to get together. The other thing, by the way, this is a bit of a side note, when the school year started in September, the government, the Ministry of Education said, oh yeah, no problem, most of the schools are prepared, they have bomb shelters. But some civil society organizations came together and held a press conference in Lviv. I attended it, and they said only 30 to 40% of schools have bomb shelters. So the others, you had to walk a block or two to reach a bomb shelter. But when you're in a classroom and the alarm goes off and a missile is on its way, I'm sorry, you don't have time to get to a bomb shelter. The other thing I found, including in some Airbnbs that I've rented, is that they advertise there's a bomb shelter, but it's been converted to a cafe or a strip club or something like that, or it's closed altogether, or it's so bad that even a rat won't go there. So there's a whole range of circumstances there. Now this video coming up, I knew there were parents with kids coming, and I think it's a bit of a funny video because there's a parenting, way of parenting here in the West called helicopter parenting, where kids really hover over their kids, they spoil them to death. And we see that in Ukraine too. But what this young lady argues is that what a difference between how I was brought up and how parents are bringing up their kids today. It's a bit off topic from the war, but I couldn't help but include this. Watch.
Чи ще є такі батьки? Я просто зараз тільки допетрила, наскільки велика різниця між нашими дітьми і нами в дитинстві. Зараз ти йдеш за дитиною, ти маєш купити цукерочку, сочок, печеньку, щоб в дитини були позитивні емоції, завершення дня, так сказати. Йо-майо, я в своєму дитинстві була рада, що мене в принципі забрали. Я не говорю вже про якийсь сочок. До мене на Новий рік не приходив Дід Мороз з мішком подарунків. Мене баба звала на кухню подивитися на черв'ячків з моркви, поки мама хлопне форточкою під гілочку ялинки запхає слоника. Зараз, коли ми йдемо в гості до дітей, ми завжди купуємо те, що вони хочуть, або даруємо гроші. Коли була мала я, і мене питали, що тобі, доцю, подарити, я завжди знала, що риторичне питання. Тому що мені завжди подарять світер на вирост той, який мені треба. Зараз, коли діти падають, вони, звичайно, починають плакати, бо забилися. Коли падали ми не плакали. Ми вставали і обдивлялись штани, бо не дай Бог, там хоча б п'ятнишко, або не дай Боже, ще гірше, дирочка, все, дома вигребеш так.
Yeah, so that's a good one. This is also a really funny, it's a short one. At the beginning of the war, it was the start of the growing season, pretty much. And this video shows how people were fed up with the sirens, with the bombing, and they went ahead with their planting anyway. I love this one. So, this one is a bit on the serious side. The other interesting phenomenon, again, it's not a big one, but it is definitely there, that within a lot of Ukrainian families, there's been division exacerbated by the war. I don't think it started because of the war, but it's definitely been, the gap has been made bigger by the war. What I mean is, as you know, there are a lot of Ukrainian families who have relatives in Russia, or they have relatives in Russian-speaking Eastern Ukraine. And to this day, a lot of young people tell me that their relatives don't believe that Putin started this war. They believe that the Ukrainians started the war. They believe that the Ukrainians are firing on them. Yeah, it's pretty incredible. Maybe they're watching all the Russian state television, I don't know, but this young lady had a very tough time. I'll let her tell you the story, but watch.
Хочу вам розповісти історію, як я поспілкувалася зі своїм татом. Він, до речі, громадянин Росії, але проживає в Україні. Ну, дуже багато часу він проживає в Україні. Більш свого життя. У нас відбулася розмова сьогодні. Ну, ми дуже рідко спілкуємося, взагалі ми дуже не близькі люди, ну, віддалено жили один від одного. Але іноді спілкуємося. І під час війни ми спілкувалися, але ми не говорили про те, хто це робить. Ну, тобто не затрагували тему саме хто бомбить, саме хто вбиває і тому подібне. Просто говорили про війну. І коли ми сьогодні затронули тему про те, що хто бомбить, він мені просто спіною рта доказував, що це роблять не нацисти, бандеровці, фашисти. Ну, в мене просто я впала. Я просто впала. Людина, яка живе протягом, не знаю, 40 років тут чи менше в Україні, і каже мені, що у нас є фашисти, бандеровці. І тут я задала йому таке запитання, тому що я розумію, що говорити йому про те, що тут такого немає, просто немає сенсу. Я задала йому питання. Звідки у бандерівців, фашистів, нацистів є зброя? Просто звідки вона? Ну, він що її з пазуху достав і почав бомбити Маріуполь? Чи він у шафі її достав? Ну, він на це відповідає, що типу у нас Америка спонсує це, Я окей, яку зброю, що вони там надають? Він каже, джавеліни і ці Байрактар. Чи. І я просто тут впала, розумієте? І я питаю, що таке джавелін? Що таке? Ти знаєш, що таке джавелін? І він такий, типу, зброя, і сам не зміг відповісти на це питання. І я пояснюю йому, ну, якщо ти мене не віриш, там, я тобі поясню, але ти можеш зайти в інтернет і написати джавелін і що це таке. І прочитати. Це противотанкова зброя, яка вона має дуже маленьку таку, типу, ну, не ракету, я просто не знаю, тому не буду говорити, але вона не може зруйнувати ціле місто. Це джавелін.
She actually did 2 videos like this and goes into further detail, but I think you get the message that there are just some parents or relatives who don't believe that this was started by Russia, and they're not taking the effort to do the research. I think they're just brainwashed by Russian state media or whatever. But it's, I think the number is pretty big of this. Here's a lighter side video. As all of you know, support for Ukrainians worldwide has been tremendous. The one positive thing I can say about this war is Putin didn't expect it, but an indirect result of this war is that it's boosted not only people's knowledge of Ukraine, people actually know how to say Zaporizhia and point it out on the map, but they also know the color of the flag, and they you know, the support has been overwhelming. Perhaps nowhere else more than in Poland. Already before the war, Poland, I think, hosted about 2 million Ukrainian laborers. Well, they also worked in very high sector jobs, for example, technology. And I've been there a few times since the start of the war because it's a transit point for many of us, but we see an amazing outpouring of support for Ukraine. So I thought I'd play this video. It's with someone on I think he's Polish, but he might even be Ukrainian, but he's singing a Ukrainian folk song in Poland. And you even hear, for example, Ukrainian folk songs being sung spontaneously at wine bars and things like that, like the other night I saw in Chisinau. So this is really cool.
Людка, що
Oh, sorry, the wrong one. But you can watch this.
Чи можу я приютити русських біженців? А скільки їх там? 3. А вони за кого? За Путіна. Конечно, можу приютить. Що я не людка якась чи що? Я помогу. Тим більше в мене 3 хороших пакета осталось. Да, направляй до мене, все. Давай на зв'язочку.
Співаю польською на вулицях Кракова. Поїхали. Hej, tam gdzieś na czarne wody siadam na koń kozak młody, czule, że nasz jest dziewczyną, jeszcze czule z Ukrainą. Hej, 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 sokoły, oj, jaj się góry lasy doly, dzwoń, 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 dzwoneczku, mój stepowy koroneczku.
There are a lot of videos like that in Poland, including by very well-known singers. This one this is one of my favorites. When the war started, it also Easter Velикдень wasn't that far behind. So when a lot of Russian speakers came to Western Ukraine, there are a lot of funny videos made, and the assumption was that some of them weren't patriotic Ukrainians but spies. And one of them ended up at the Velикдень brunch table. Watch this.
Російський шпигун Фьодор потрапив на Великдень до Львова, і він ще ніколи не був так близько до провалу.
А подайте отой кулічик, будь ласка. Паску? А яка різниця? Піди там на кухню, кулічка візьме. Там? Там. Христос воскрес! Воістину воскрес!
That one made the rounds quite a bit. This one is, these two coming up are kind of interesting. So in Lviv, again, there was a lot of influx of people from the east. And I'm going to get into the language topic in a couple of minutes, but some businesses involve, whether formally or informally, vetted customers to make sure that they're the right type of customers. So you'll get the message. Watch this. Oh, sorry. One more.
Доброго вечора, ми з України.
Lots of videos like that as well going around about proudness of the armed forces. Here we go.
Студія Міс Принцес. На манігер? Завтра? Та, звісно, записати ми вас можемо, але зараз у нас діє певна перевірка клієнтів. Скажіть, будь ласка, чи ви готові її пройти? Тоді розпочнемо. Слава Україні! Слава нації! Україна! Путін! Прекрасно, чудово. І останній етап перевірки. Слава Ісусу Христу! Завтра на 12 на манікюр ми вас чекаємо, бережіть себе.
Здравствуйте, а вас можна постричься? Доброго дня. Заходьте. Скажіть паляниця. Паляниця. Слава Україні! Героям слава! Україна! Понад усе! Слава нації! Смерть ворогам! Путін! Хуйло! Руський воєнний корабль!
Дивіться, я задам вам одне питання.
And then this video is kind of funny, it's short. It's also speaking of vetting, of a woman asking a man who's trying to pick her up whether it's a war going on or a special military operation.
Понятно, що ви за людина?
Задавай.
В Україні йде війна чи спецоперація?
Спецоперация.
Пошов нахуй!
And then this is a video also of, it became very popular, of Ukrainians singing one of the Russian songs, but the words have been totally changed to poke fun and insult at Russia. I think many of you have seen this.
Розцвітали в небі барактари, поплили корабліки на дно. Що такої ви не ожидали, що ваш президент таке хуйло?
So during the war, someone like me who's growing up in Ukrainian community, we went to Українську школу, Українознавство, but there are a lot of words that we never were taught when we were in Українська школа. Among them, for example, бомбосховище or bomb shelter, відкрите небо. And then there's a new word called військкомат, basically the army kind of recruitment center. And there's two videos coming up of Ukrainians who, I'm sure they're only joking because I think everyone is ready to fight, but they're trying to avoid the men from Vizkomat, who seem to be everywhere these days, but watch this.
Як батьки будуть в школу дітей?
Oh, sorry, I skipped one. This is just a funny one. Again, the difference between parenting in America and Ukraine. Sorry.
Америці.
Baby, good morning. Прокидайся швиденько, ставай в школу, сніданок готовий, а то запізнишся, давай.
Та як батьки будуть в школу дітей в Україні?
Щоб твою гадю назад вставай! Який сніданок? То я тобі що в якомусь ресторані, чи що? Давай, до 20 по 8.
Here's the one I was talking about. Should be.
Доброго дня, ми з військкомату. Ви Богдан? А, то ви німий? Добре, до побачення. До побачення.
Алло, військкомат? А скажіть мені, будь ласка, чого ви моєму чоловікові прислали повістку? Ви що, не в курсі, що він сліпо, глухо, німий? Та бігме. Чо-чо, я вам зараз кажу чо-чо. В нього зір поганий. Він взагалі не видить, що в хаті море роботи. А за слухом то ще гірше, бо він ніколи не чує, що я до нього балакаю. Німий. Ну, питаю, де зарплата? Мовчить, як риба у воді. Кажете, то це не рахує? Ха. Чуєте, а анатомічні аномалії рахуються? А в нього ще й руки прямо зі сраки ростуть. Ніц робити не годен.
The other word is komendantsky chas, curfew. Early on in the war, it would be roughly sometimes from 9 to 6. Then it went from 10 to 6 or 10 to 5. And now it's 11 to 5, I believe, in most cities. But guilty of this as well. Some of us have broken the curfew because we came home late from somewhere or another, but the Ukrainians came up with innovative ways to avoid getting busted. And then this is a good one. It also has English subtitles about a Belarusian citizen trying to come back into the country. I don't know why anyone would try, but this is a pretty funny interview process at the border.
Перед въездом в Беларусь вы должны ответить на несколько вопросов. Английский я не знаю, поэтому будем говорить по-русски.
Хорошо.
Первый вопрос. Как нельзя называть нашу страну?
Белоруссия.
Да твою ж мать сказала, что нельзя.
Извините.
Национальный спорт в Беларуси.
Биокоммуна.
Правильно. Национальная валюта Беларуси.
Доллар США.
Правильно. О чем мечтает каждый белорус?
Получить шенгенскую визу.
Правильно. Какой самый главный белорусский миф?
Бесплатная медицина.
Верно. Назовите место, где каждый белорус может свободно выражать собственное мнение.
На своей кухне.
Правильно. Как нужно ответить, если к тебе вдруг обратились по-белорусски?
Нужно сказать, что у нас два государственных языка, и ответить по-русски.
Правильно. Какие видео в Беларуси являются самыми популярными?
Покаяние.
Правильно. Национальное блюдо Беларуси?
Драники.
Назовите рецепт настоящих драников.
Картошка, лук и кровь повара.
Верно. Где можно встретить белорусского патриота?
В Польше.
Еще.
В Литве.
Еще.
В США, Украине, Грузии, ну и в других странах.
Все правильно. Вам разрешено въехать в Беларусь. Подпишите протокольчик. Отлично! Поздравляю вас! Вы отправляетесь на 15-дневную экскурсию по тюрьмам Беларуси. Пакуйте его, ребята!
And then this is a bit more on the serious side. This lady is quite popular on TikTok. I believe she's a lawyer, but she gives very practical advice 2 or 3 times a day about various phenomena of being drafted into the war, border rules. Here she talks about the tearing up of the social fabric of Ukraine because of the war, including a lot of divorces and separations.
Друзі, ви знаєте, що у нас відбувається? Це просто жесть. Масовий розвал сімей. У нас цього місяця дуже багато замовлень на розлучення. І знаєте, хто розлучається? Дуже багато. Ну, реально, цифру я не буду казати, але це нереально. Я адвокат по розлученням, і в мене шок. І розлучаються дівчата, які поїхали за кордон, просто масово. Бо більш за це, ще й чоловіки, які лишилися в Україні, вони гуляють, реально гуляють. І жінки або подають на розлучення через те, що чоловіки гуляють, або через те, що чоловіки їм всі стали непотрібні, і їм без них виявилося ліпше жити. А чоловіки також подають на розлучення, коли знаходяться тут, бо вони гуляються, по-перше, а по-друге, дізнаються, що вони більше не потрібні своїй жінці, яка за кордоном. Це просто дика руйнація сімей.
I don't really agree with her take on things, but I can tell you I do hear anecdotally when I'm spending time with drivers or whoever I spend a longer time with that it's become very, very difficult on families. Let's just keep it at that, because the longer this war goes on, the more the separation is. Okay, so I'm going to try and wrap up a bit earlier because this is going on for a longer time than I thought, but at the beginning, I told you about how one of the things the war has done or accelerated is really the debate about language. How should we, for example, as Diaspora, how should we in Western Ukraine treat those who have come and are unable or unwilling to speak Russian? And early in the war, you actually saw quite a negative backlash in Lviv, especially. There's a picture of it coming up that we put on CNN of signs in restaurant windows saying "We don't speak the language of the occupier. Please speak Ukrainian." But you know, I have to be honest with you. Spending so much time as I have in Odessa, my view on this has changed a little bit. to me, the best thing I think for people to do is to be allowed voluntarily to switch if they feel like it. And you'll see some videos the majority of people in Odessa have, and that's one of the Russian-speaking centers of Ukraine. And then a lot of Easterners will tell you now is not the time to debate whether we're patriots, whether we speak Ukrainian or English, Ukrainian or Russian. Now's the time to fight the enemy. So we did a big piece on this on CNN Opinion, and it got more clicks and likes than most of the other things I've written. And there's that sign I was talking about that you saw in a lot of restaurant windows and bars in Lviv. Second. And it's an important debate because, as you know, Russia has for decades trying to suppress the Ukrainian language. So now the thinking is, as we pointed out in the article, that everything should be
Ви
done.
бачили, що російський пес за місяць вивчив команди української мови і досить добре її розуміє зараз. Пес розуміє українську мову, а наші українці не понімають.
Yeah, we included a link to this in the article. So it's a true story. Russian German Shepherd defected from Russian armed forces, crossed the border, went to Ukrainian side, and within a month he learned Ukrainian commands. And of course the Heroi Ukraina Zaras is Patron, the bomb-sniffing dog. So tons and tons of videos of dogs responding to Ukrainian commands. Second. Yeah, so I just wanted to read this part, and then we'll go back to the videos, and then we'll wrap it up. But decades after the end of the Soviet state policy to eradicate Ukrainian nationalism and language, history seems to be repeating itself as the Russian armed forces and their proxies occupy more land. The playbook includes, and it's a long playbook, restrictions on the Ukrainian language or access to Ukrainian media and online sites through such tactics as changing school curriculum to align with pro-Russian narratives, switching street signs to Russian, blocking sites like Google, substituting Ukrainian media with their own state-controlled channels, replacing Ukrainian mobile operators with Russian ones, and moving residents who have become trapped in occupied areas onto Russian internet services where all Western platforms are blocked. The Kremlin has also forcibly deported at least 1 million Ukrainians into Russia, many through so-called filtration centers, triggering memories from Soviet times of Ukrainian dissidents sent to labor camps in the Gulag. And as I said earlier in my talk, even Putin's efforts to weaponize food, stealing Ukrainian grain, deliberately shelling farmland and blockading agricultural products from leaving Ukrainian ports in the Black Sea is reminiscent of what Stalin did in 1932-33. That's when he tried to break the will of the Ukrainian people by triggering a great famine known as the Holodomor, during which millions of Ukrainians died of starvation in the very land that was so fertile that it was called the breadbasket of Europe. So this is a big theme of mine in interviews and whatever, that history is repeating itself before our very eyes on European soil. And just today on the front page of the Sunday New York Times, top of the fold, right-hand corner, the first article everyone reads is an article about how children in Ukraine caught in Mariupol and Kherson have been forcibly deported to Russia, immediately given Russian citizenship, sent as far away as Siberia. Brings back memories, doesn't it? Happening on a massive scale. And a lot of times these children lose contact with their relatives and may never be found again. So here's a series of quick videos about the language debate and what Ukrainians are saying about it. One second. This one, okay.
Рашисти змінюють українські назви на російські. Був Маріуполь, став Маріуполь. Змінилась одна буква. Одна сука буква. І вони вкотре принизили нас, українців. Вони вважають нашу мову недолугою, а нас недостойними жити. І допоки ви кричите, какая разниця на каком язикі, вони масово вводять російські школи і російську мову поглиблено. І допоки ви будете розказувати, я всю жизнь говорив на русском, то я хочу сказати, життя змінилось. Ви не помітили? У вас, певно, замало русофобії, якщо вас влаштовує.
Жіночка зі Львова пише: повітряна тривога, забігла до бомбосховища, там купа народу. Ось. Але нема жодного з сусідів, нема сусідів, всі поїхали. Але ж купа народу і всі розмовляють російською. І вона каже, і мені стало страшно, я перелякалася. Така купа народу і всі розмовляють російською. Я хочу сказати, не треба цього боятися. Навпаки, треба поставити питання, а де ж поділися ваші сусіди, де поділися патріоти? Ось цього треба насправді боятися, коли люди лишають свою батьківщину у найскладніші часи. Ось цього справді треба боятися.
I'm not taking a side one way or the other about this, but I can tell you that most of the people I've met who've left Ukraine have done so because there's no other choice. And most of them, of course, have been women and children, which has caused tremendous break in social fabric, but also a lot of desperation. This is a bit of a controversial video. I wasn't sure whether to include it, but going back to the language debate, or continuing with it, I'm talking to you about how Ukrainian Odessa has become, and these 2 or 3 videos show you what I'm talking about.
Хтось каже, що Одеса – це проросійське місто. Ну, тоді дивіться самі.
Всім привіт, мене звати Олена і я з Одеси. І позавчора виставила відео, де я свідомо сказала, що переходжу у звичайному житті на українську мову. Це моє рішення, нікого я не змушую. Весь наш персонал, у нас 4 магазини в Одесі з косметикою та одягом, розмовляють українською мовою. Коли ви заходите, вони до вас вітають українською, ну і починають консультувати теж українською. І я отримала близько 200 коментарів, де люди це підтримували і казали, що це правильно, і з цього почнеться повноцінна, вільна Україна. І треба робити все, щоб популяризувати українську мову. І от я отримала один отакий коментар. Один. Що я вам хочу сказати? Якщо людина буде ходити і кричати «Я розмовляю на русском, мене ви не заставите говорити на українській», це її право. От чесно, я ніколи в житті не буду до того лізти, але посюду вона буде чути тільки російську мову. Що ти несеш, те ти і чуєш. Тому я чую скрізь українську мову. Дуже багато людей з інших областей. І я вам скажу більше, в коментарях я прочитала, що наші одесити теж намагаються перейти на українську. Суржик. З цього суржика почнеться наша солов'їна мова. Але це має бути від душі. А отак от кричати і казати, що я ніде не слышу, окей. Сиди там, де ти не чуєш ніде українську мову. Ну це дуже-дуже рідко зараз.
Вчора наткнулась на відео Олексія Паніна, в якому він каже і за Одесу там також. Так от, я можу повністю підтвердити як одеситка його слова. Тому що до 24 лютого, в принципі, так і було. Одеса вважала себе такою, взагалі, якоюсь окремою державою, хоча всі прекрасно розуміли, що ми живемо в Україні, але більшість одеситів якось так думало, що Одеса – це взагалі Одеса. Ось. А зараз місто дуже сильно українізується, дуже сильно. І це можуть підтвердити вже дуже багато одеситів. Так, це відбувається. Це дійсно відбувається і прям іде в тому напрямку.
Так, давай останній раз повторю.
Добре.
Паляниця.
Паляниця.
Укрзалізниця.
Укрзалізниця.
Дівчина.
Дівчина.
Та не дівчина, а дівчина.
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 Да я так і кажу, дівчина.
Та навіть орки в коментарях пишуть, навчи його, не дівчина.
А все, давай я буду казати просто жінка.
Пройшлася сьогодні інстаграмом і помітила таку тенденцію, що наші українські блогери, які все життя розмовляли російською мовою, почали переходити на українську. І що б я хотіла таким людям сказати? Холєра, як то гарно! Як ви, курча, круто звучите! Наскільки ви в цій мові привабливі, милозвучні, витончені, ерудовані! Я вам просто не можу передати. Для чого вам була ця дебіляча кацапська мова, яка звучить як зливний бичок в туалеті? Збийтеся з неї і не говоріть більше ніколи. Розмовляйте нашою, милозвучною, українською, солов'їною мовою. У вас це прекрасно виходить. Так, інколи ви закидаєте суржиком, інколи ви не все розумієте, інколи ви не зовсім літературно розмовляєте, але в тому і ваша краса. Якщо раптом вам потрібен буде репетитор з української мови, я готова зголоситися і вам допомогти. Я буду всіляко сприяти тому, щоб мій народ розмовляв українською мовою. Я горджуся вами, ви молодці.
And then even Ukrainians who have gone overseas, like to Spain, have found this friction, a little bit of friction between Ukrainians from Western and Eastern Ukraine. Watch.
Привет.
Sorry, one more.
Давай познакомимся с тобой.
Ти де знаходишся?
Тут, на улице где?
Ну, в якій країні ти знаходишся?
В Україні.
Ну, то який привіт, привіт. Слава Україні треба казати.
Героям слава. Ну,
Ти не будеш з правою і лівою до кінця життя бавитися.
Привіт.
Розкажу прикол. Ходжу я в Іспанії на іспанський курс. Ну і зі мною там багато російськомовних. Можна сказати, всі російськомовні. Київ, Харків і інші міста. От. Ну і там викладачка питає, наприклад, як це слово, вона пояснює слово і питає, як це буде українською мовою. І замість того, щоб там сказати українською мовою, як це буде, там бути, дружити, ходити, сміятися, вони говорять бить, дружить, кушать, гулять. Розумієте? Чому? Вона ж питає, стає запитання. Як українською мовою буде? Вони відповідають російською. Як я маю на таке реагувати? Дати пописку, вийти звідти, не ходити. Що я маю робити? Просто капець. Поясніть мені.
Хочу обратиться к львовянам. Где вообще ваша совесть? Как вы можете для своих же украинцев, люди, которые уезжают с детками с зоны боевых действий, с Чернигова, с Харькова, с Киева, вы сдаете нашим же украинцам квартиры вдвое дорого? Как вы можете вообще? Люди в других странах бесплатно дают жилье или дешевле, во всяком случае, рыночной стоимости.
So again, criticism of Westerners bulking Ukrainians from the East. We're just going to go through these quickly. So here's one again of an Eastern Ukrainian. I cut it down a bit, but complaining about the costs and the mova.
Хочу звернутися до Западної України. Давайте закінчимо це блядство. Так случилось, что восточная часть Украины разговаривает на русском языке. Мы реально бежали от войны, которую Запад до сих пор не прочувствовал. Не дай бог, конечно, я этого не желаю никому, но тем не менее. Мы поехали все, большинство там, кто в Европу, кто на Западную Украину. И на Западной Украине, когда до войны стоили квартиры, дома, гостиницы по $100-200 в месяц, сейчас они стоят чуть ли не $1000 в месяц. Мало того, что мы ведем вам огромные деньжища за съем жилья, так вы еще нам диктуете, на каком языке нам разговаривать? Мы ж вроде бы в вільній країні живем. Свободной. Или как? Если вы уже нас обдираете по поводу денег, то хотя бы не диктуйте, не говорите, на каком языке нам разговаривать. Уважение должно быть какое-нибудь. Мы живем все в одной стране.
Мамо, ви думаєте, то так легко?
Sorry, so I'm going to I think I'm going to end on this theme here. Here you have two separate women talking about the difficulties of resettling overseas as refugees without the husband, without the father. this one is pretty easy to get through, but you'll see the second woman is going through a very, very, very tough time. And again, multiply these stories by thousands and thousands, and it's very, very tough on women who are looking after their kids alone in these various countries.
З тими дітьми на кордоні, потім десь в школі на матрасах в спортзалі ночувати. Що стоїть їхньої гуманітарки? Я розумію, що то такий курорт, як Мальдіви, але то взагалі не таке. В кращому випадку тебе хтось прийме на квартирі. Але та їхня благодійність не нескінченна. Нас там ніхто не чекає. І все одно прийдеться десь шукати якусь роботу і дітей десь прилаштовувати. Мамо, це життя з нуля починати. То дуже тяжко і дуже страшно.
Виїхала за кордон під шумок на халяву. Часто кажуть мені і іншим людям, які покинули територію України у зв'язку з ситуацією. Що ж, у мене до вас питання. Чому ви вважаєте, що всі люди, всі жінки, які покинули Україну, це є якісь бомжари, або цигани, або якась алкашня, які в Україні жили просто в жахливих умовах, і тут Європа! І такі всі поїхали, вау! Ні, це все є нормальні люди, в яких в Україні була робота, сім'я, дім, плани, друзі, як і я, які жили нормальним життям, успішним життям, комфортним життям. І виїхали за кордон, тому що там стало небезпечно для дітей, перш за все. Тому що я говорю про жінок, які поїхали задля своїх дітей шукати безпечнішого місця. Ми не бомжі. А тут, приїхавши сюди, реально почуваєш себе як бомж. Ти не знаєш мови, ти не маєш роботи, ти нічого не розумієш, це новий менталітет. Ти абсолютно без будь-яких опор, ти втратив все, що там роками було надбано. Ти це все залишаєш і їдеш з нулем сюди. І нехай тут є якась допомога чи з житлом, чи з харчуванням, але повірте, для людей, які привикли самі влаштовувати своє життя, це, вони приймають і тішаться, і дякують. Але це, повірте, не прикольно, коли ти мав влаштоване життя там. 90% людей, які виїхали, це люди, які мали влаштоване життя. Можливо, є люди, які жили дійсно в якихось поганих умовах, і для них оце халявне якісь подачки від Червоного Хреста, це типу вау, клас. Ну я таких ще не зустрічала. Тому перестаньте, будь ласка, звинувачувати людей, які виїхали в халяві. Тут немає халяви, тут не all-inclusive. Це важко. Це важко залишати влаштоване життя в місті, в якому ти бачиш себе, в якому є все, що тобі рідне твоїй душі, і їхати в нікуди. І з нуля все починати. Ще й одній, ще й з дітьми, і ще й хвилюючись за країну, тому що там бомблять, а це твоя земля, і тебе душа болить. Давайте не будемо нікого засуджувати, ні тих, хто лишились, ні тих, хто виїхав. Кожен прийняв рішення по своїй силі. Прийняв рішення, опираючись на свої особисті якісь варіанти. Кожне рішення правильне. Халяви ніде немає. Ні в Україні не добре, ні тут нелегко. Зараз всім важко. Така реальність. Давайте не тягнути один одного. Я ще не чула, до речі, щоб хтось про це говорив, а я скажу про ту велику проблему, не проблему, а складність саме ситуації, з якою стикаються жінки, які зараз за кордоном. Діти. Діти, які з тобою 24/7. Навіть якщо не ходять десь в школу чи в садочок, мої зараз 4 години всього лише в школі проводять, все рівно для тебе це великий стрес, ти для них єдина опора, а в тебе то опори немає, ти теж в стресі. Знаєте, коли я була в Україні, я була вільною пташкою, мої діти проводили зі мною 4 дні в тиждень, далі вони були у батька, потім ми їздили в село. І, в принципі, коли мені потрібно було кудись там поїхати на Кіпр, в Іспанію, в Колумбію, я спокійно залишала дітей з татом, вони прекрасно справлялися всі разом, я була вільною. А тут, з 27 лютого, я з дітьми 24/7. І я їх фінансово забезпечую повністю сама. Я їм даю моральну якусь підтримку, наскільки можу. Просто бавлю. Це, важко. Це важко, тому що ти сама не встигаєш відновитися, а тут ще 2 дітей. Навіть коли одна дитина. Може, навіть одна це складніше, тому що в мене 2 хоча б між собою бавляться. І чесно, хочеться деколи кричати, вити. Мої діти, я їх дуже люблю, і якби вони мене би тут не було, вони є мої гіди, які привели мене сюди, значить так має бути, я заради них тут. Це капець як важко. Народ, це капець як важко. Це одна якась така велика складність. Мені здається, що багато хто про це не говорить, тому що про це якось навіть соромно говорити. Тобі важко з твоїми дітьми. Блядь, важко. Знаєте, це капець як важко. Я хочу спокою, я хочу тишини, я хочу свободи. Я хочу хоча б одного дня, одної сутки побути одній. А тут це неможливо. І плюс в стресових умовах. Так що, ті жінки, які зараз за кордоном з дітьми, чесно, це просто це героїні. Це героїні. Я схиляю голову, і я теж перед собою схиляю голову.
And this one is in Canada, I think.
Знаєте, що я зрозуміла за 2 місяці перебування в Канаді? Це те, що українці тут, які мігрували 5-10 років тому, абсолютно не розуміють тих, які приїхали в Канаду зараз. Вони вважають, що нам так само важко, як і їм, що нам варто просто трішки перечекати, адаптуватися, прикласти більше зусиль, і в нас буде прекрасне, успішне життя тут. Але справа в тому, що ті, хто приїхали, в принципі, виїхали з України зараз, більшість з них абсолютно не готувалися до міграції. Це не був наш якийсь плановий вибір. Більшість з нас тікало в пошуках безпеки, особливо безпеки для своїх дітей. І коли планові мігранти прирівнюють нас на один рівень, наче вони знають наші емоції і відчуття, то насправді це не так, тому що це абсолютно різне, коли ти в один день мусиш зібрати валізу речей і всього лише одну валізу речей, в яку ти береш кошти, документи і речі буквально на 2-3 дні. Це не те ж саме, коли ти готуєшся до цього рік-два, ти взнаєш замову про те, в яких сферах діяльності ти можеш в тій чи країні усвоїтись.
Ми ще 2 і 3 завершимо Q&A.
Усім привіт, щойно була історія, яка просто бум! Загалом стою в жабці в черзі, якась чувіха з боку мені каже: «О, курва, попередивна українка». Ні, точніше, з'їбана українка. А в цей час я просто з мамою розмовляла українською мовою. Я так повертаюся і кажу: «Повтор, що є ще раз». І вона каже: «З'їбана українка». Ну а далі просто історія замовчує, бо я насправді агресивна людина і дуже така вспильчива. Мене це так вибісило. Курва, просто, що ти мелиш? Загалом чекаю поліцію, чекаю на те, що буде далі, але я ніколи не дозволю ображати моїх людей і мою націю. Які б українці не були, ти не маєш права говорити такі слова. Тим паче, коли я просто стояла в черзі і все. Вона втекла. Без зубів.
Today, let me say. So this is a funny one. Everyone will remember when the Russian forces came in the first few days and weeks into Ukraine, and they were surprised. Wow, people have latest iPhone and all these nice things, and then they were filmed on video taking away refrigerators, toasters, you name it. So this brilliant Ukrainian girl thought she'd do an instructional video for Russian women on how to use Ukrainian stolen items. I hope this is the right one.
Звертаюсь до російських жінок. Ми знаємо, що ваші орки понавозили вам купу нашого добра, а ви не знаєте, як тим користуватися. І ми так порадилися між собою і вирішили, що не люди якісь чи що. Ми допоможемо вам розібратися в тому, як правильно використовувати речі за призначенням. Значить так, це така спеціальна лікувальна водичка. П'ється вона зранку, склянку 1,5 наще, залпом. Називається оцет. Наливайте собі, наливайте спасителю і чаюєтесь. Далі, це кабель. Ви могли б прочитати десь в інтернеті, що це виделка, але не вірте. Це все брехня бандерівців і провокація Заходу. Це спеціальний український кабель, який можна пхати зразу в розетку, напряму, більше нікуди не треба. Пхайте таку в розеточку, притримуєте добре 2 руками і дивитеся собі мультики до ранку. А це гойдалка. Тільки її потрібно змайструвати самому. Берете, відрізаєте оцю частину, вам її не треба. Кидаєте дріт за карниз, робите отаку петелечку і одягаєте на шию спасителю. І катаєте його, поки не посидіє. Все, як попробуєте мої лайфхаки, відпишіться. Треба буде, зніму другу частину.
коли приїхав в Польщу і знаєш тільки англійську?
Я хочу купить бутылку олії. Мне нужна
От заспокойся ти своїм ломаним тим англійським. Тут всі українську вже давно знають.
Це добре.
Сірі, слава Україні!
Для того, чтобы начать общение с Siri, зайдите в настройки.
Сірі, слава Україні!
Вот что мне удалось найти в интернете по запросу.
Сірі, слава Україні!
Героям слава! Слава нації! Смерть!
Боже! Боже! Вам оці два треба оновити. А оце беру.
Тоді блокпост, що then?
Слава Україні! Звідки і куди їдете? Зі Львова до Києва. Щось заборонене везете? Ні, не везу. Так, зброя є у вас? Зброя? Є. Яка зброя? Яка зброя? Бомба. Ви що? Яка бомба? На задньому сидінні. Те що?
Та скільки вже, бляха, можна їхати до того Києва? Трясся твоїй матері, там же Бог такого телебня не зятя. Щоб те права добрали, і в армію те забрали, скотіна ти така.
Ну то що, документи показувати? Ні, щасливої дороги. Везіть цю бомбу додому, бо ще тут зірветься.
І все. Дякую.
Браво.
Може є питання?
О, питання, так, може є питання. Питання
Прошу.
якісь до Михайла.
You said two very interesting things at the very beginning. Number one, that in your opinion this war in Ukraine has helped Ukrainians from eastern and western Ukraine to get to know another better. And number two, that Odessa has become more Ukrainian. So would you agree with the recent comment of Askod Lozinski?
I know Askod.
Right. The former president of the Ukrainian World Congress and a lawyer who was in Ukraine recently. He was in western Ukraine, Lviv, but he also visited Kyiv, Bucha, and Irpin, who said recently after his visit that Ukraine has now become, I'm paraphrasing, more świadoma, meaning more Ukrainian essential and therefore nationalist.
Yeah, so I'm surprised he said something so diplomatic. He tends to be a bit controversial, but a few weeks ago we had a panel at the Lviv Media Center, and там було одна українка, вона говорила, казала, я думаю, там було член Верховної Ради чи щось таке, і вона казала, що, знаєш, в нас дуже велика країна, це є країна на розмір Франції, і дотепер ми один одного добре не знали. We didn't know each other very well. І через війна, і через переселенців, що так багато тут приїхали до Західної України, то що ми перший раз від один одного навчимося. We're getting to know each other. І це було, I think I put it in my article, this was a really interesting thing to say, because I think a lot of people assumed that, yeah, Ukrainians is kind of like Canada, we more or less know each other, but there are differences. But this isn't the first time this has happened. In 2014, I was in Kyiv as part of the OSCE, 2014-2015, and a lot of people from Donetsk came to Kyiv, set up businesses there, and let me tell you, in Donetsk, they're pretty aggressive when it comes to business. So a lot of them started driving Ubers and opening up shops and stuff like that, and the Ukrainians who were already there didn't take this very well, but eventually they adapted. So I think people are adapting, and I think, again, from what we can gather, hopefully from everything we saw today, is that, to me, the best approach is to not force, Ukrainians from the East to switch over to Ukrainian. I think this will happen organically, naturally. The level of patriotism is going through the roof. I think Odessa is a good test case. I've spent a lot of time with Odessa friends there recently, and all of them, without exception, say, ми сам перейшли на українську мову, and they were raised Russian speaking, and they never spoke Ukrainian, they rarely used it. In fact, before, if you came to Odessa, except people like me, but if you came to Odessa, and spoke Ukrainian, people assumed that you were from one of the nearby villages out of the countryside, and they looked at you as kind of lower class or a farmer. But that all is changing now. So these are really, really good developments. But you will have cases where people are not going to voluntarily switch over to Ukrainian. But I think the main point I'm trying to make is what's inside, the patriotism, how you feel, not how you communicate. And I think this is something I remembered in my head. I wanted to say this, and not everyone will agree with me. But I think the older diaspora here in Canada has to also accept the fact that this is a reality in Ukraine. There are a lot of people who are coming here who don't know how to speak Ukrainian. I assume they'll probably switch over time, but it's not going to happen right away. But we should treat them with compassion as well. And before the war, I would see visitors from here. They would go to Kiev or to Odessa, to a restaurant. They order in Ukrainian, and they are responded to in Russian. Even when it's like an insult, and they walk out of the restaurant or say something harsh to the oficjanka. I don't think that's the way to behave, quite frankly, given the reality on the ground today. Tak, proszę.
I would like to just make a note. I think that, first of all, until the war started, what you're proposing and saying was appropriate. What changed is the bomb.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I think that our definition and our compassion has to become much clearer, much more focused, and much more precise. It is no longer, just you can speak any language you like. I had a very, very difficult experience this week. I went to the Shevchenko museum here. And this lady is trying to convince me that she was in Quebec and no one wanted to respond to her in English. And that's the same example as in Ukraine. Yeah. The definition of war is they came, they are the aggressor, I want your home. You do not want to give it to me, I will destroy you.
Yeah.
Number two, the language. You are speaking the language of someone who wants to destroy me and destroy everything that I stand for in Ukrainian. Yeah. And number three, the perception of Ukraine as a result of all of these correspondence from CNN, from MSNBC, from all these international shows that came to Ukraine. You know what, they all of a sudden all woke up and said, who are these people? Mm-hmm. They were absolutely shocked by who they found, the level of culture, the level of intelligence, the level of art, museums, literature, and everything else. So I think all of that compassion that we say, it's all right if you speak Russian. You are speaking the language of someone who wants to destroy me and my language. So I think the diaspora and everybody has to wake up to the reality that that's the way we have to define it. No longer saying, we have a war. Yeah. No, we have an attack. We are being attacked. Yeah. They want to kill us. So even giving up a territory won't solve it.
Yeah, I agree with everything you're saying, actually. And I'm a lot of what I'm saying also is what I'm hearing on the streets or from people and so on. But it's the language of the aggressor. As I said in my CNN article, and I repeat this a lot on it, is that those points I mentioned when I read out that CNN article, that this is history repeating itself. They are trying to eradicate Ukraine off the face of the earth. So no dispute with you there. I will be very honest with you, kind of looking ahead. What really, really worries me is the fatigue that seems to be taking hold in parts of the world towards the Ukraine war. I get worried when people like the outgoing Prime Minister of the United Kingdom or even Chrystia Freeland said it the other day that a lot of our economic problems are due to the Ukraine war. Well, what does this do? It causes a lot of people to say, okay, well, let's end the war because I can't afford heating, I can't afford gas for my car, I can't afford to buy groceries. This is a very, very worrisome problem. The luxury Mr. Putin has is he doesn't really have to face elections, like Western leaders do. He doesn't have to really listen to what the electorate thinks of him. But you have a lot of Western leaders who are up for re-election, and in a few weeks' time we're going to have the November midterms. And you're already hearing from some of our friends on the other side of the aisle, Republicans, saying that we have to reevaluate how much money we're giving to Ukraine. So to kind of finish off this thought, what I say whenever I get the chance on air is I call this a global war. It's not a Ukraine-Russia war, it's a global war, because we are so interconnected these days, much, much more than 2014, that something happens on Ukrainian soil thousands of miles away from Hong Kong or Singapore or wherever, that it's going to affect people. So the other thing I worry about is the millions of Ukrainians who have fled. We're now between 7 and 8 months of the war, and a lot of their benefits are running out. When I was passing through the United Kingdom, I heard that hundreds and hundreds of Ukrainians are basically becoming homeless because the families who are hosting them with government support, because of the economic difficulties, can no longer host them. These people are not going to be out on the street, but they have to be taken into kind of council hands and supported there. So it's the next few weeks are going to be very, very tough. The other message I said recently in London, including on Sky News, is I said, you know, if you're a normal person living in the United Kingdom or in Canada or the US, get ready for possibly a war economy these next few weeks or months. And they asked why, and I said, well, because it's better that we deal with Mr. Putin now on our own terms, rather than deal with him later on his own terms. And dealing with him later on his own terms, and we could only be a few weeks from this, I don't mean to cause you too much anxiety, but my prediction is as he faces even more humiliation and losses on the battlefield, he will turn to what he does best, the terror, which could include biological, chemical, God forbid, nuclear tactical weapons, God forbid, manipulating the situation at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and causing a deliberate accident, which, by the way, I deal with in my book, the Chernobyl accident. And right now there's the fear that they may blow up that dam north of Kherson. That would be an absolute disaster. Same thing that happened decades ago in Ukraine, on Ukrainian soil. They blew up a dam and it caused a lot of flooding and deaths. So yeah, we're going into rough territory, but I wish that Western leaders would put some sense into their heads and think about what they're saying, and also give whatever they can to Ukraine right now. It's not politically correct to call this a proxy war, but if you talk to a lot of Ukrainians, they're getting the feeling that they're fighting the Russians not only on behalf of Ukraine and its existence, but also on behalf of the West. One more thing, maybe rambling on a bit here, but I wanted to tell you that I try to travel as much as I can by train between cities in Ukraine. And one of the reasons I like that is because I get to interact privately and intimately with members of the Ukrainian armed forces. And I gotta say, all of the ones I've met, it's not been many, but all of them are absolutely exhausted, I think traumatized. Most of them have not taken a break in 5 or 6 months. And when we're talking about a break, it's 1 week, and then they have to go back. So the other thing I've seen, this is my last thought on this one, is whenever I can, I go to Lychakivsky Cemetery in Lviv just to kind of get a fix on what's going on there. When I first visited in March, I counted about maybe 40 or 50 graves inside and outside the cemetery. They've ran out of space inside the cemetery, so they have to bury our servicemen and women on the outside. When I visited 2 or 3 months later, that number had tripled already. Where I lived in Lviv, I was right around the corner from the so-called military church. And on some days, you see 3 funerals happening at once. It's just heartbreaking to watch. But the thing that Lviv does, and it's Lviv, the Lviv we love, is that they put up signs, these pretty big billboards in the Rynok Square, and it says Lviv Pochchaya, and then they have a short biography and photo of the ones who have left us. So yeah, that's kind of a little barometer that I use is to see how these situations shift.
I have a question for you. So you show us TikTok videos of Ukrainians, some of them with controversial point of view, some of them traumatized.
we see it during the year. So, like, what's the point? What's the general thought you're making out of this? Like, because it's it's a lot of topics. It's do you have any point?
Sure. Well, I should have wrapped up, but I thought I did in the intro. There are a few points here, but one is that I talk about how social media, especially TikTok, has become a forum for Ukrainians to laugh, to cry, to share information, to complain, to perhaps point fingers at others. But I think it's still, there are controversial videos here, but still it's a good way, I think, for people to vet what they're feeling inside. It's far, far better than for them to keep it inside. At least that's what I found in various conflicts of the world. We're not going to agree with everything, that's right. But also the Telegram channel. I mean, most Ukrainians at the beginning of the war, they were scrolling through Telegram nonstop to get the news. And I think these are also independent channels for people to get their information of what's going on the ground. What are their issues, or what kind of bombing happened, or who's been displaced? Because the media situation in Ukraine is at a very challenging time right now. I explained that earlier. They're all part of this telemarathon, and they're all lacking financial assistance. So the normal reporting that you'd normally see going on isn't happening right now. So, I think on the whole, it's a good phenomenon, and Ukrainians have taken to it in huge, huge numbers. It's also, I think, a way for the outside world to get a glimpse of what Ukrainians are feeling inside. Sure, there are controversial views, but I think for the most part, these are Ukrainians trying to tell not only their own countrymen, but outsiders of what's going on the ground and inside of themselves.
Okay, so I have one more follow-up question then. How do you, when you create this list of, this point of view and this point of view, how do you distinguish and make sure that your creation is not used by Russian propaganda? Because there are some messages from people who are real people, but when you emphasize it, it makes to think that it's really a problem, right?
Yeah, sure.
You make to think that the avoiding a draft is really a problem, or that the people are taking out of the streets just to military and is really a problem. So
well, I have an answer for you for that. I have to be honest with you, that CNN opinion piece that I wrote about language debate, I was very nervous or anxious about it because it's a very, very sensitive topic. And kind of way we measure these things is by the comments that come out, by the number of clips, of course. But I think on the whole, and even on very kind of patriotic Facebook pages, things like that, people said, Molodets, I'm glad you wrote about this because this needed to come out in the open. So of course, look, take it from me, I know anything I say can be used by the other side, twisted and used in negative terms. I don't want to get into detail, but there, for example, whenever I said this before the war, I said that perhaps certain Western countries should look at banning Russian nationals from their territories, and that caused a very, very big reaction. There have been other things that I've said that perhaps aren't controversial, but the other side will take it and twist it. So, it's difficult to win one way or the other, but all of us are being very careful in what we say, very measured. I think we try, after a time you develop a good sense of where the red lines should be. And look, I'm based in Ukraine for the most part, and my interviews and my writing speaks for itself in terms of my stance on Russia and Putin. And Russia still has a very long arm in Ukraine, but I'm going to stay there and keep on doing this analysis because I think it's really, really important. Hope that answered that. Добре, дякую.
Браво.
Дякую. І ми маємо вино і сир. So the cider is from Berryland Winery. It's just north of Kiev, and it was an award-winning cider maker in central Ukraine. And then in March, and it was family-owned, and then the Russians came and bombed the crap out of it. So it's an award-winning cider. It's got awards in the USA and in Frankfurt in Germany. So we love it. We discovered it in Odessa. Whenever we see it on supermarket shelves, we buy it up. So I was able to bring some here. And then the other one quickly is from Manzul Winery. It's in Odessa. It's what's called a micro winery. And most of it is white. It's a grape native to that area of Ukraine. And then we have the red, to a lesser extent, it's called Odessa Chorne. And when I told Canada Customs about the amount I'm bringing in, their eyebrows were raised a bit, but when I said what it's for and where it came from, they said, thank you for declaring it. Go, you're a free man. The reason I brought it today, and I want you guys to taste it, is because it's really, really important to promote brand Ukraine. Whether it's fashion, whether it's wine or cider or technology or whatever. The people I'm talking about right now, the owner of that cidery, the winemaker, they are on their knees right now, lacking markets, because inside Ukraine the economy has collapsed to a point where people have far, far less disposable income. So this is something I'll leave you with you as well. I mean, maybe as part of the rebuilding of Ukraine, we can find ways to promote these sectors of the Ukrainian economy which were really roaring to life before the war started. Why do we not see Ukrainian wines on store shelves at LCBO or in British Columbia? I see some Ukrainian vodka, but no wine, stuff like that. So maybe, you know, we have such knowledge and know-how within the Ukrainian community, chambers of commerce and so on. Maybe we can start thinking longer term about how we can help these sectors. Trust me, they are on their knees and need help. So anyway, but they're very, very happy that I was able to bring it here and that you'll be able to enjoy it today.
Пане Михайло, дуже дякую за таку цікаву приготовлену презентацію. Ми і сміялися, і плакали. І дуже гарно знати, що в такі часи, трагічні часи, українці також можуть знайти гумор у всьому. Як Михайло вже сказав, ми запрошуємо вас до дегустації вина і цидри, і також до дальшого спілкування з Михайлом коло його книжок. Я тільки хочу подякувати усім спонсорам, які цю зустріч спонсорували. Це є фундація Цурковських і Шевченківська фундація, Дельта Бінго і Контакт. Дякую всім членам дирекції і адміністратору, які сьогодні були з нами. І також всім вам, для чого ми робимо ці зустрічі, і дякуємо, що ви сьогодні прийшли. Також хочу сказати, що тут по сусідству відкрито Уно, кафе, яке вони спеціально сьогодні відкрили, тому що вони знали, що ви будете тут. Якщо хтось хоче борщ і вареники, чи смачну каву, і там смачні є солодкі, то прошу, після нас зайдіть до них. І дякую вам за увагу. Слава Україні! Спілкуємося далі.